Hello and welcome to the ROKER Report podcast in association with Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen. My name's Philip West, and after what's been quite a turbulent week for Sunderland off the field in the wake of promotion, we thought we'd sit down, record a podcast, have a chat about what's happened. There's quite a lot to discuss, and to do this I'm joined by Rich Speight. How are you this morning, Rich?
I'm alright, yeah, I've had one coffee, I've got my second one in my hand, so yeah, I'm alright.
Excellent, fantastic. And we're also joined this morning from Australia by Martin Wanless. How are you this morning, Martin?
I'm pretty good, thank you, Phil. I had a pub lunch this afternoon, had a couple of beers, so yeah, I've had a couple of beers, whereas Rich has had one coffee, so yeah, I am good.
Excellent. There's only one place to start this week's podcast, and it's with the ongoing rumours of crypto investment in Sunderland AFC. Obviously, the name Fans Together didn't mean much to many people before last week, but then they emerged from the shadows and everything started to become, well, not particularly clear, but there was a lot of information. And really, just starting with you, Rich, you've really led the way on this in terms of ROKER Report with your two podcasts with Tom White and with Martin Calladine and James Cave. Having had some time to digest it and obviously dig through all the information, is this something that we as fans should be unequivocally standing against?
Yeah. Unequivocally. I'm not going to equivocate on it. Yeah. The thing that, again, I would reiterate is that there is going to be some money behind this bid. There must be for it to have got where it is now. Some people think that it's a complete red herring, and I can completely understand that in terms of what the motivation behind, say, Charlie Methven speaking to The Athletic is, how some of the kind of rumours started. That's another matter altogether, but the fact that the EFL are even looking at it means that it surely has some substance behind it. Now, where that money comes from, that's the big outstanding question. Martin and James told me, it wasn't on the pod, but I spoke to them earlier in the week as well, and they said that TFT reserve, I think, 7% of their DAO, their decentralized autonomous organization, for venture capital, and I think it was 12% of it for themselves. I may be wrong on that figure, but they're not willing to talk to anyone as yet. I got in touch with them to open a conversation. What I won't do is give them a platform until they answer some key questions and the source of the funds. Who would be in control of those shares ultimately, because it wouldn't be the DAO, because they haven't put the crypto tokens out to the public yet. That would sit behind it. So who would be in control, I think, or in control of those shares, sorry, because they wouldn't be in control of the club, is the question that, unless they're willing to or able to answer, conversation won't go much further than that. I know that in their white paper they talk about the fact that they want to work with existing supporters trusts. I know that they haven't been in touch with Red and White Army as yet, which is interesting given their commitment to fan engagement and fan ownership, that they haven't even tried to open a dialogue with the supporters trust, because what we were expecting on the back of this story coming out was some sort of publicity drive or engagement process from them. And I've gone back, somebody kindly posted underneath one of our podcasts a link to the press conference that Simon Wentworth, or Mycock, depending on which name he goes by,
yes,
did at Episcopi, the team they own in Greece. And, well, I mean, amateurish would be I think, generous description of it. And everyone seemed very on edge and very cautious and very kind of sanguine for a press conference announcing supposedly a big deal and a new manager. Everyone was quite downbeat. I probably know as much as anyone, and I don't know really what's going on behind the scenes. All I can say is that it's up to fans really to make sure the EFL knows unequivocally where we stand. And one of the encouraging things actually has been the 99.9% unanimity of the fan base in reaction to even the concept of this. And I do as well, one thing I would say is I do understand people saying, don't give this oxygen, don't give these people a platform. Completely and utterly get that. I teach people about disinformation a lot of the time at work, and one of the things I say is don't give it oxygen. Just ignore it. Post something positive. Post something that kind of contributes something to the conversation. But sometimes you've got to post a warning. And what we've tried to do on this, Davey and I, working together on it really hard to ensure that we know the detail and the technicalities of what this is. We've just tried to ensure that we can give fans all of the relevant information that they can make an informed view on the situation. But it's certainly not a positive, and I can't see any positives in this particular move. We can go on and discuss kind of why this might be happening, and that would be interesting to get your perspectives on, as people who haven't quite been as close to it. But from my perspective, it's entirely about ensuring that my fellow fans really can take a view on this that isn't just kind of a reactive, oh, it's crypto, it must be nonsense. It is crypto, or it's actually not crypto. That's the weird thing. It's not crypto. It's not nonsense. It is dangerous, and that would be my message, really.
Just throwing it to you, Martin, on the back of that, obviously you've been kind of watching this from afar as it's unfolded over the past week or so. And since we obviously in the 4 years we were in League One, we were often linked with various takeovers. There was the Dell Group, there was Mark Campbell, there was obviously William Storey, who's been lingering around. Does it feel to you as though 4 years in League One have kind of turned us into something of a basket case of a club in the eyes of people from outside? Are we seen as an easy target for these kind of dodgy potential ownership models, do you think?
It's a difficult one to answer that. I don't think so, is my gut instinct. I think, if you go back 4 years, I think, we'd all be critical of the way that the club's been run over the past 4 years. But the intention from the outset was clear that Donald and Methven were going to come in, try to get investment from elsewhere, obviously in the shape of Sartori. And I think it's always been an open door over the past 4 years, rather than being seen as a basket case and an opportunity for some crazy ideas or crazy investment. And, as you rightly point out, we've seen some interest from people like Mark Campbell, which, there for the grace of God we went. And the Dell thing, which, some people were incredibly well behind because on paper it sounded fantastic. But we look at what MSD have done at other clubs and you go, shit, well, thank God we didn't go down that path as well. So I think we've had an open door for owners. And I think it's always been the case that we were open to investment, open to takeover. And obviously for the past, 18 months, Kirill Louis-Dreyfus has had what turns out to be a majority shareholding, but not quite a majority shareholding. And I think, to be fair, we've actually got a bit of stability off the field. Since then, we haven't been a club that's been primed to be flogged. We've put infrastructure in. We've had somebody in charge who's looking long-term and has a long-term plan. But we've always had the side issue of Donald and Methven shares. And, until February, we didn't know quite what the extent of that shareholding was, did we? So I think it was always going to be the case that this summer, regardless of whether we went up or stayed in League One, we were going to see movement there. Now, the cynical part of me, after what we've been through over the past 4 seasons, thinks, this is actually just a red herring. This is just smoke over there to make us look over there while something else is going on. Because you can't fathom how this could happen. How this could get through the EFL. And look, I know that Tom White told Rich in one of the pods, and for anybody who hasn't listened to Rich's conversation with Tom White or with Martin and James this week, I do urge you to go back and listen to them, because there's so much information. Like I knew nothing about it bar what I'd read in the press and on social media until I listened to them, and I feel I've got a much better grasp of what's going on. So Rich, I think you did a great job with them, not blowing smoke up your arse or anything, but I think you did a great job with both of those. But we've only got Tom's word for the fact that it's gone to the EFL, or he understands it's gone to the EFL. Now, Tom, we've had Tom on the pod a number of times. Tom's a great bloke, huge fan of Sunderland, as well as a professional journo. So we've got to take that as face value. He understands it's gone to the EFL. we've had no confirmation of that. Now, when we had the takeover with Kirill Louis-Dreyfus, there was a statement on the website from the club saying this is in the process, this has gone to the EFL, and we had some confirmation of that, didn't we? And we haven't had that. So you kind of wonder how much is actually in this. And Rich, as you say, look, if it has gone to the EFL, there's been proof of funds, there's been talk of private equity companies backing it, venture capitalist companies backing it. So there must be some money there to get it to that point. But, I think categorically, we cannot and should not and never should be the platform for experimentation at that ownership level. Mm-hmm. And, regardless of whether this is a good, bad or indifferent proposition, and obviously there's huge question marks around it, we are not the club, we should not be the club, we cannot let ourselves be the club to be a platform for experimentation. And, we could look back on this and go, you know what, that was actually the worst thing that ever happened because this thing's took off and it's been brilliant over here. Maybe. We don't know. We can't see it in the future. But let them experiment in non-league. Let them experiment in the Greek second division. Let them get that model up and running. And in 5 years' time, brilliant. Look, if it's successful, we could entertain it. But at the minute, it cannot happen because it is so unproven and we would be taking a massive risk when it feels as if we are just starting to get the semblance of a solid club back.
Yeah. Sorry, you raised your hand there, Rich. I know you wanted to add something to what Martin was saying there.
It was just to go back to the people who currently own the shares and to emphasise, I know I did say in the previous pods, but to emphasise the fact that they said when we put the statement out back at, that was 2019, after the Boxing Day game.
It was.
And in early 2020 saying they'll sell up to responsible custodians. And I think that's the thing we need to keep holding them to, because whether or not there's actually something in this, and obviously Methven has talked to the Athletic and said, yeah, this is accepted, we want it to go through as quickly as possible. That is a completely and utterly irresponsible way of discarding of a large proportion of a major football club. I think it's disgraceful, to be frank, that somebody who purported to be a responsible custodian of our club in the past has taught the talk in terms of what we are as an institution would even countenance something like this, because it's taken me a week and a bit to kind of get a really full grasp of this. But I was already aware of who the fans together were from Martin and James's work at the beginning of the year. Anyone who keeps a really close eye on the whole crypto world and on the kind of fan ownership world and on a lot of these issues kind of had an idea of what this was and how unserious it was, or how early in the stage of development, to be kind to them, this model was. And for this to have been in conversation with Methven and Donald for, getting on for a couple of months, and for them to actually not turn around and say, sorry, you might say you've got the money, but this isn't right for a club the size of Sunderland, I think is wholly irresponsible. And I think if it was possible for them to go down in my estimations, have gone down in my estimations, and they're at a sub-zero level.
I think you're giving them probably a lot of credit there, Rich, to stick to the word after 2 and a bit years.
Well, yeah,
it's intentions, isn't it? You go, right, we'll sell up, but it'll only be the right person. That buys you time. And that's all that we're doing. It wasn't with great intentions for our future. It was like, it's buying us time because we haven't found the right person yet. Right person, right price.
Yeah. Just picking up on what Martin said there earlier, and I think that was a really, really good point, is that particularly at this stage when we've just got back into the Championship after a 4-year absence, and we could be potentially on the verge of something really exciting, because as you said, Martin, obviously the infrastructure's been improved, the recruitment has undoubtedly improved, which we'll come on to later, despite 1 or 2 mishaps along the way. I think it is absolutely imperative, as you said, that Sunderland AFC cannot be used as a test bed for something that is undoubtedly incredibly volatile, and it could be built on effectively a bubble which could burst at some point, and then everything could really hit the fan. So I'm sure you both agree with me that it is imperative that the AFL stand against this. Do you both have confidence that they will? I mean, I know obviously in Davy Brown's article, which was published earlier this week, he used the phrase "hopefully when this has been laughed out of town," which obviously the EFL hopefully will make sure that it does get laughed out of town. Do you two have confidence in the AFL's processes on this? Because they do have form for letting sharks get into the game.
Yeah, no, I've got no confidence whatsoever. And I think I'll just go back to a point quickly before I come back to that, Phil. Like, the thing that puzzles me, and I'm sure it puzzles a lot of listeners as well, and I know Rich touched on it with Tom White, and I think this is actually a whole thing that's designed to force Kira Louis-Dreyfus' hand, because the most sensible thing, logical thing, if you're going to look at this and go, what's going to happen, is Kira Louis-Dreyfus puts his hand in his back pocket and buys the shares out, because there's no other logical scenario that would explain what's going on here, because somebody's trying to force somebody's hand. The logical step is KLD buys it. There's potentially a dispute about valuations or whatever it might be, and I think this is kind of designed. You could tell with the statement that was put out by the club by Kira Louis-Dreyfus last week. Him and Sartori are very much aligned, which has always been the assumption, because Sartori was influential in bringing KLD in here in the first place. So I think, there is an element of that, and hopefully, fingers crossed, looking at it from my removed position, like everybody else is, apart from people like Rich who've delved into it a lot, I hope that happens. In terms of the EFL doing their job, absolutely no confidence whatsoever. I don't think anybody's ever had confidence in the EFL or the Football League before them of doing the right thing or the logical thing. And it's funny because I was, we do the on this day articles on the website every day, and I was researching one back from 1990 when Swindon had beaten us in the playoff final. They got promoted, but financial irregularities meant that they were demoted to the third division, or the second division as it was, third division. That's right. And it was in that midpoint between that decision about Swindon being demoted was announced and before we were named as the team that would go up. And there was some analysis in the newspaper I was looking at. And the journal, I think it was Paul Nunn from the journal, was looking at each team. There was Sheffield Wednesday, Newcastle and Sunderland, who had a claim to go up. And he looked at every team's claim. In the Sunderland section, he said, logically, because we've got the playoff system in place, blah, 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 the logical decision for the Football League to make is to put Sunderland up. However, when can we rely on the Football League to make a logical decision? And that just rang so true.
Yes.
From, what are we talking, 32 years later? And we still cannot rely on the EFL. And we've seen so many cases of bad ownership being allowed in. We've seen Wigan being sold as allegedly settle a gambling debt. We've seen Bury. We've seen all sorts of things that the EFL have just waved along. And my big concern is this comes on their table. They go, I have not got a clue about this world. I do not understand this model, but it's got fan ownership in, so it must be all right. Let's go through, because it's not a majority shareholding, it's a minority shareholding in the grand scheme of things. Let go through, because what's the worst that can happen? And I think only by us standing up and shouting about it and raising attention, raising concerns, will we get them thinking, maybe we should have a look into this, because you've got people behind it who've gone bankrupt, who've had loads of companies who haven't survived. It's dodgy, and like the EFL need to look into it deeply, and hopefully by the stuff that is being raised in the media, they will be prompted to do so.
Absolutely. You want to make another point on the back of that, Rich?
Yeah, it's really to follow up on that. Martin, you're absolutely right, and it's a really good point. The fact that this isn't a full takeover, probably, especially with all of the other things that they've got to deal with at the minute, Derby County in particular, where, to be fair to them, they haven't let the transfer of shares go through because they're not assured that the money's there. I don't know whether that's for the upfront sale or the ongoing financing of the club, but that's the other aspect of this that I wanted to talk about, is the ongoing financing of the club. And just to be clear, even if they've got the money to buy the shares, they need money to be able to invest in the club. They need to fit in with the kind of the investment plan of Kira Louis-Dreyfus and Juan Sartori. There's a lot of work that needs doing, not just on the squad, but on the stadium, on the match day experience.
Absolutely.
There's loads of areas of the club, like club shop, merchandise, that this ongoing, if this rumbles on for much longer, is going to affect. We haven't got any transfers to talk about. We wanted to talk about, looks like we're going to sign X, Y, or Z. We haven't got anything like that to talk about. We haven't got anything, renovations of the stadium to talk about, which would be lovely. We haven't even, got a new mural on the concourse to talk about. Nothing of any note. And what I don't want is this to drag on, where it's going to be, another 4 weeks, and we're going to be getting towards the start of the EFL season, and we're still on this. And again, that's for Donald and Methven to show some morality. I know I'm asking a bit much on that, yeah. But and then on the EFL, yeah, I just can't. I can't have confidence. But the only thing I would say is I think Wigan was possibly their last chance to really balls up, and they ballsed up. And
yes,
the Crouch report came out. They've got the IREF, the independent regulator for English football, looming over them, and the government supposedly going to put a white paper out soon to legislate for regulation. And if they don't want to have all of their power taken away from them completely, they can't muck up what is the biggest club in the EFL. And I think that's the final point I made. And I know it was made in an article as well, that Kirill Louis-Dreyfus is the chairman of the biggest club in the EFL.
Yeah.
And if the chairman of the biggest club in the EFL doesn't have significant influence over this process, I wonder what the point of the EFL is. So, I think that's the end of my ranting about this. Don't know if I have anything else I need to or want to say, really.
Sorry, Martin, I just saw you raise your hand there. Did you want to add something on the back of that?
Yeah,
as
no,
well?
I just think that point that I'm sure in the short term concerns every supporter. It's like what impact this has on us in our preparation for next season. We know from information that's been released previously that there's an agreement that everybody puts in pro rata what their shareholding is to stabilise the club, to buy players, to invest in the club, and all that sort of stuff. And you'd hopefully think that there is an agreement. Okay, well, we're in talks with this to sell our shares, but that investment that we put in now will be taken off the sale price or whatever it is. But my big concern is this is stagnating everything that we need to do this summer. And make no mistake about it, this is a big, big, big summer for us.
Oh, it's massive.
And we need to get it right. And
Absolutely.
we'll come on to talk about some transfer things and some other bits and pieces. But my huge concern in the short term about this is the impact it has on our ability to go out and buy players, to offer new contracts, to do X, Y, and Z. Because there's a potential that a lot of things are on hold until this is resolved. And realistically, whichever way it goes, and whoever comes in or doesn't come in, it's going to take a while to sort out.
Yeah, I think clarity is needed, definitely. Would you agree with that as well, Rich?
Clarity, certainly. I think clarity is going to be really important because, there's been some talk about Alex Neil being quite demanding, quite rightly, about kind of what he's going to need for the squad. And Mel Ray as well, to be frank. I would always get that in. But, she needs backing as well in her transfers. And while this goes on, that's all up in the air. The other thing I would add into the conversation is maybe a potential answer to what Martin raised about why KLD hasn't yet taken the shares. There's an element where, again, it's not just the share price, it's the ongoing investment. And if he was to be at essentially 80%, then he'd be responsible, or him and his family would be responsible for 80% of the costs rather than 40% of the costs. So it doubles his ongoing investment, not just the purchase price, and it doubles his ongoing risk as well, and his liability. So I think...
Doubles the opportunity, though, doesn't it?
Oh, it doubles the opportunity, certainly, but where's the opportunity to make profit in English football? It's at the bottom of the Premier League if you're going to go up and down, or it's at the top of the Premier League if you're going to win.
Yeah, but surely that's his aim for us, isn't it? It's to get us back to that, bottom third of the Premier League.
But then, we maybe get a lot ahead of ourselves now. Is there an acceptable? We've seen it with Newcastle. We're seeing it probably with us in the mid 2010s. Is it really acceptable for Sunderland fans to be losing 70% of games and struggling to stay up every season in the Premier League and bouncing up and down between the leagues as a way of making money?
To me, what's puzzling about that whole scenario, right, is the valuation of the club and the shares. And I know that price of 11.7 or whatever it was will have changed based on our championship status. But you look at the valuation on clubs like Sheffield United, recently. Like, it's a completely different ballpark to what they're talking about for valuation for Sunderland. And, if you go up in the Premier League, the valuation of the club is significantly different, isn't it? So, like, it smacks to me of him not being all in. It's him taking a punt and being involved because he likes football, likes the sports business, and he's not fully in. And, the money with either him or his trust fund or his family is undoubtedly there to do what everybody wanted with Sunderland. It kind of raises questions about his intentions. Is he serious about it, or is he just here for a bit of a ride? And we'll find out the answer.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point that you both made there. I think Dreyfus could be on the verge of something special here as custodian of this football club. There's absolutely no doubt about that whatsoever. And he was on the balcony at Wembley, as we saw. We know when we won the playoff final against Wycombe with 45,000 Sunderland fans there. And, that should have really inspired him to kind of, grasp the nettle and understand what he could be on the brink of here. I think just to sum this up, then, I think we can all agree that this is something that everybody should be extremely cautious of, to say the very least. And let's hope that if it does progress, that the AFL does put the barrier up and make sure that this is blocked, stopped, and that responsible people can come in and take that stakeholding in the football club to make sure that, when Donald and Methven do finally leave, that whoever comes in to replace them does have the financial clout to move forward. Would we all agree on that?
Oh, yeah.
100%. And from my point of view, I'm sure everybody else listening to this will agree. The most important thing is we get the right people in for the long term of the club. They've got to have the right ambition for the club. They've got to have the right intentions. And, going back to what we said earlier, it can't be an experiment.
Yeah.
We are not in a position as a club to be used as a testing ground or a test tube. Like, we've got to get the right people in who are going to do the right thing. And I'm completely biased, but if you had a spare 11 odd million or 20 million or 100 million, it's a good club to get involved with.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we've gone quite deeply into that to start with this morning. I just wanted to move it on. We mentioned transfer business earlier in the podcast, and an interview that came out yesterday from Christian Speakman regarding, he said it was vindication. The transfer business last season was vindicated by promotion. He said that we need to find a balance, and that there was obviously the fan complaints that there was too much youth and inexperience in the team, but that was proven to be the right approach when we got promoted. Just wanted to start with you on this one, Rich. We know Speakman is a forward thinker. He's very much a modern football executive. Do you think he has a point there, or do you think he was kind of bailed out to a certain extent when they hired Alex Neil to replace Lee Johnson?
I mean, he did hire Alex Neil to replace Lee Johnson, so he's got to be given credit for that. Look, as with anyone's performance in a job, it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be things that you can learn from. It's whether he can learn from them. We know that we were probably left short in two departments, and thankfully we managed to get through that period with Ross Stewart not picking up an injury. And I think that's like it does come down to the fact that Ross Stewart stayed fit for the season, that we weren't exposed in the forward area and the lack of cover there, that Bailey Wright stayed fit at the back and we weren't exposed for the lack of cover there. But we were only a couple of unfortunate tackles away from being really short in two key departments. So that's got to be taken on board. We also know that they obviously went for some people in January that they weren't able to secure, and they had to change manager at the last minute, and that was clearly not exactly what was needed. The Defoe gamble is the big negative point on that kind of whole transfer window, which was a critical transfer window, and it was a gamble. It maybe had some commercial considerations hanging behind it, and it didn't work. I don't think that's Jermaine Defoe's fault necessarily. Anyone offered a decent wedge of money to play football for a few months is going to take it.
Yes.
I don't think it should colour out a view of Jermaine, who's been a great pro over the years. I just think in terms of Speakman, he's done the job, and hopefully his bosses will be assessing his performance and putting points to him where he can make improvements.
What was your take on Speakman's comments there, Martin? Because I don't know if you have a chance to read the interview that he gave with the Chronicle yesterday. It was an article written by James Hunter. Do you think he has a point? Do you think that the transfer business was vindicated, because as you mentioned earlier on, there was a lot of improvement made to the infrastructure of the club last summer. For years we had a scattergun recruitment policy in League One, didn't we? We were bringing in players on short-term loans, on frees. There was no real rhyme or reason to it. And I think personally there is rhyme and reason to our transfer business now. And in that sense, I think you'd have to say Speakman's done a good job in that regard. Do you agree with that? Do you think that's a fair point?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine today about this, just in a general work sense, rather than Sunderland and Speakman sense. And it's kind of, how do you judge people, right, in work, which essentially for Speakman this is, right? Is it outcome or output? His task was to build a squad and management structure to get Sunderland out of League One, which he's done. So tick, he's been successful in that. I think he's attracted a lot of criticism for January. And I think the majority of it is down to that gap between Lee Johnson leaving and Alex Neil being appointed.
Yes.
And I think because of that, the transfer business that we did without a manager in place on deadline day comes under scrutiny, because we'd left a lot of things to the last minute. And obviously Defoe came in, and you can read all he wanted into the effect of Lee Johnson's departure on that transfer taking place to start with. Tom Flanagan leaving, which I don't think Lee Johnson would have sanctioned. And I think, we actually did good business in January. Roberts came in, Clark came in, Matete came in. And, to one extent or another, all three of them had been influential in our run-in in the last third of a season, once especially Clark and Roberts got up to speed. I've got a slightly different opinion on Defoe, because I think Defoe let Speakman down massively. Because to me, if you're Jermaine Defoe and you sign a contract for the end of the season, you stick it out. And, the whole thing about, I'm going to retire to give Nathan Broadhead a chance, which is effectively what he said, is complete and utter bollocks. And to see him walking around with Harry Kane going, I could still play now, it's just crap, right? Now, I think Defoe has really tainted his legacy at Sunderland by that. And, I loved Defoe in his first spell. And, when he signed, I had visions of him coming off the bench at Wembley, being part of that playoff winning squad, or even better, scoring the goal that took us up automatically. And that could have been his legacy, which would have been tremendous. And now it's tainted, however you want to look at it. But I think to your point, Phil, which I think is correct, our transfer business has been very strategic with a medium to long-term view in mind. And you look at people like Roberts and Clark, if we were thinking short-term, we wouldn't have brought them in, because they weren't physically in a position to do anything for 4-6 weeks. They needed the training, they needed a couple of reserve games to get up to speed. And we saw that at the end of the season, where Clark and Roberts really hit the straps coming into the playoffs. And, I think the more that we can take that long-term view as a club, with managerial appointments, with coaching appointments, with player recruitment, the better we'll be. So I think I kind of look at Speakman in two parts. You've got the transfer thing, which I've actually got no problem with. At the end of the day, look, I think you could argue the toss over whether we should have kept Flanagan or not. Argue the toss over whether we should have kept Denver Hume. I don't think anybody would say either of those two players would be a part of the medium to long-term future of the club. But for those few months, we probably could have done them hanging around the squad just in case there was an injury. I think the biggest criticism I would have of them is that gap that it took to appoint Alex Neil. And, you've got to be cynical in football, and you've got to be having conversations with the right people to get the right things happening in place. If you're going to change your manager, you've got somebody who's primed to come in. I think, he'll learn from that. And to me, that's the biggest thing, because Christian Speakman is now, 18 months into a job, which he'd never done before. And he's going to make mistakes, he's going to be learning. But if we think he's the right person for the long term, which Kirill Louis-Dreyfus obviously does at this point, then you've got to take it. And I think, I am far more comfortable as a supporter looking at it, going, well, okay, you can kind of see the logic in these signings, you can see the logic in this. We saw last summer, it was hell on, wasn't it? People were kicking up a fuss because we hadn't brought signings in. And it's dead easy to buy players. You could buy anybody, you could pay over the odds, you could get somebody in from wherever if you want to just have people in the changing rooms, people on the pitch. But getting the right players is a far more difficult process. And I'm confident that we've done that last summer. I'm confident that we've done that in January. And, that gives me confidence that this summer, we've not seen a transfer in yet for first team, but I'm confident that we will take the right approach if everything's on a level playing field in the boardroom, that we'll see us, we'll see us do well over the medium to long term.
I think that there's one or two really interesting points to come out with that. The first of which I think is, if you look at all the signings that Speakman has overseen last summer and in January, from my perspective, I think the only real failing, for want of a better word, was Frederick Alves, who didn't really contribute. He looked okay in patches, but he never really got a solid run in the team. If you look at the majority of the signings that have been overseen by Speakman over the past 2 transfer windows, most of them have made sizable contributions. Alex Pritchard, for example, really, really good effective signing. Callum Doyle, really, really good early season. He had a bit of a dip, but then he got a few appearances under Alex Neil. So I think you have to say that Speakman, it was mixed very much. And I think maybe the balance was tilted a little bit too far in favour of youth. Just a shade. Not too much, but just a shade. And I think that obviously affected us over the winter when the likes of Dennis Serkin were being overplayed and you could see the form was dipping, etc., etc., etc. But I think what you said there, Martin, about the managerial change, I think was probably the one thing about Speakman that I think you have to really hold him accountable for, because the pursuit of Roy Keane, obviously when Lee Johnson was fired, they went on a pursuit of Roy Keane. Everybody started to think Keane's coming home, etc., etc., etc. That doesn't happen, and Alex Neil comes in. And the perception, I suppose, at the time was, well, we've got second prize. He's not Roy Keane. Is he inspirational? And he's turned out to be probably the best decision that Speakman has made recently. So I think that, as you said, he's done a mixture of both good and bad. Key for me this summer is how he and Alex Neil can work together to really improve this squad and to kind of get it up to championship standard. Because I think we've got a nucleus of a good squad there that needs improvement without any shadow of doubt. But last summer, and if you remember when the buzzword or the phrase was data-driven recruitment, it was data-driven, we're going to bring in players, we're going to really scrutinise, we're not going to buy players for the sake of it. And the longer that went on when we didn't bring players in, that became kind of a millstone around Speakman's neck. It eventually bore fruit, as we saw. And I suspect they'll probably take a similar approach this summer. I mean, if you look at Ipswich last summer, for example, they went all in. They put together a team of what was in theory kind of a championship all-star squad, really good players on paper, and they didn't get promoted. So, there's different approaches to that. But, yeah, I think the point you made earlier on, Martin, about, the mixture of good and bad that Speakman's done, I think is absolutely valid. Just looking at potential signings this summer, which makes for a nice little segue here. Obviously, last week, John Ruddy was linked with Sunderland, recently released by Wolves. In my opinion, will be a decent backup for Anthony Patterson. What do you think about that, Rich? Do you think he could be an option for us?
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, we definitely need another keeper at the club. We probably need another 2 keepers at the club.
Yeah.
Whether he'd be backup, whether he'd come in as a backup from dropping down from the Prem to the Championship, we'll see. That will be a conversation, obviously, for Alex Neil to have alongside. And I think, just to skip back to your previous point, you've got to give credit to Stuart Harvey and the recruitment team as well.
Absolutely.
Alongside Speakman. It's a conversation for those to have. Experienced player, Alex Neil knows him, would be, I think, a very sensible choice just to bring into the club, even if it was, as backup, but also as somebody who can work with David Priest and work with Anthony Patterson to just improve the goalkeeping department overall. Because we know that goalkeepers bounce off each other and learn from one another. So I think that, that would be a really sensible move. I wouldn't have any qualms about that transfer.
Yeah, and obviously, Martin, you mentioned earlier this morning you saw another player had been linked with us, Daniel Everson, I believe.
Yeah, Everson, Leicester goalkeeper, been on loan. He had a spell at Rotherham. He's had a couple of seasons at Preston. I think Alex Neil brought him into Preston. Yeah. He won their Player of the Year award this season. He played against us at the Stadium of Light a couple of years ago for Rotherham and saved a penalty from McGeady. So look, as Rich said, we need probably 2 goalkeepers to come in this summer. I think the interesting bit of the conversation is whether that's as backup to Anthony Patterson, whether he starts as first choice next season, or whether we bring people in who can compete for that first team place, and it's kind of like, okay, there's your 2 or 3 who are going to battle it out. The one who starts on the first day of the season is the one who's impressed the most in pre-season. And look, I think Patterson did fantastically well in the last few months of the season. I think he improved quite significantly over the games he played.
Mm-hmm.
I must admit, and it's probably an unpopular opinion, but I would not be 100% confident with him starting the season as absolutely clear first choice. I think we need some very good competition to come in to challenge him, to push him. And if he starts as first choice, but there's a really good keeper on the bench, I'm fine with. But if we brought in either somebody who is just there to sit on the bench or a really young keeper, I would be concerned if we were hedging all of our bets on him playing the full season to the standard he played the last few weeks of the season, certainly.
Well, on the subject of goalkeepers, obviously another news story that was on the agenda this week, rather unfortunately so, was that of Thorben Hoffman, who obviously was on loan at Sunderland last season, has now gone back to Germany. And an interview that he gave with Bild, the publication in his home country in Germany, regarding his treatment after being diagnosed with COVID, which is made for quite an uncomfortable read, I have to say. What was your take on that, Rich? It was obviously, you went in depth about it regarding what had happened to him. What was your view on that? Because obviously there were quite a few cynics saying that, well, he was just trying to save face because he lost his place to Patterson and he's made up a COVID story to kind of just, try and get himself off the hook. What did you think about that one?
I have no reason to doubt his version of events.
Yeah.
I don't know the truth of it, to be frank, other than what he said. But obviously the club came out with a very vociferous and clear statement that they think there are inaccuracies in what he said. Whether it's one of those things where there's a problem with translation, I'm not entirely sure. As somebody who's suffered with COVID and post-COVID fatigue myself for a few months, it's horrible. And you can feel like you're all right one day or even half of one day, and then the brain fog hits you, lose concentration. So all of the things that he was describing as his symptoms were very familiar to me. And that drive to want to get back to work and not actually being able to is definitely something that I can sympathise with. But I don't have anything more to add to what the club and Hoffman have said. I'm sure that lawyers will be involved to one extent or another here, because it's an accusation, quite a serious accusation.
Yes,
and I don't really have much to add to it beyond what's been said and my own personal experience of kind of COVID fatigue.
Yeah. And do you have anything more to add on that one, Martin? I mean, it hopefully it doesn't blow up into something nasty and bitter between club and ex-player, but you never know how these things can pan out, do you? So,
who knows what the truth is there? And Hoffman has all season been doing a column in Germany about his time at Sunderland, and
Yes.
that was obviously to get his reputation in Germany up. He's doing a regular column to get media interest.
Yeah.
He's obviously presumably there's some money there to be paid for a column, and I think there's probably a bit of reputation salvaging going on. After if you look at it just on face value, he played the 6-0 at Bolton and was never seen again.
Mm-hmm.
We had the clause in his contract that apparently if he played another game, we would have had to sign him if we went up, which I think Alex Neil denied knowing about and denied his selection was based upon that. But you don't know where the line is with that. And you also know that our medical record going back for a few years with Alves and all sorts of stuff hasn't always been great. So, who knows where the truth lies? As Rich said, there's potentially a lost in translation aspect there with being slightly positive. The validity of different tests come into question and all sorts of things. And, who knows? It's just a sorry, unnecessary end to what was actually quite a decent, useful loan signing.
Yeah.
And it's just, as well as all of the takeover talk, just another thing that we don't need right now going into a new season where there should be an awful lot of hope and optimism of what the next 12 months hold.
Absolutely. Well, I wanted to end on an upbeat note, so I think we will. Obviously, last week we got the news that season ticket sales had gone past the 28,000 mark, which I thought was absolutely fantastic. Obviously, optimism is still really, really building for the return to the Championship. Do you think, I'll throw this question to you both, do you think that the current situation regarding the ownership will deter people from buying season tickets or renewing, or do you think people will show some faith in what's going on at the club and continue to buy their tickets regardless? I'll start with you on that one, Rich.
I think, there's been a lot of talk over the past kind of 6 months or so of people not renewing, of people boycotting.
Yes.
As soon as a bit of positivity comes in through some signings and some and obviously the promotion giving a massive boost, I think there's loads of reasons for people to renew or to purchase new season tickets. I think it's great that there was a lot of people stepped away from the club when it was just a depressing place to go on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah.
A lot of people, in and around Sunderland, when I would visit, say, "Oh, I used to go, but I don't go. I won't go in League One," which I don't understand because I follow my team through thick and thin. But it's understandable if you're a casual fan and you're going to see some, you're interested in the quality of football, which hasn't always been great in League One, especially from the opposition. So I think it'll keep rolling on. I think there's loads of benefits that come with the season card this time.
Yeah.
So you get in to see the 23s and Sunderland women at Eppleton. It's a whole club season card. You don't need to go and buy a Sunderland women season card to get in at Eppleton. I think that's a really big thing as well for both squads, really. It just gives more value to the season card. So I think there's loads of reasons to put your money into the club in that sense, and it, going right back in a full circle, if fans are going to put their money into the club, the best way to do it at the minute is to buy a season card and show your support in the stadium, because we saw against Sheffield Wednesday what that can do in terms of driving the lads forward.
Yeah. Do you agree with that, Martin? Do you think it's good to see the sales continue to go upwards, and hopefully they continue to do so as we get closer to the new season?
Well, of course it is. And look, the ownership thing is a distraction. I think as a group of three here in this conversation, I think we're probably a lot more aware of all of that than a lot of people are, just because we've been talking about it a lot, and Rich has been delving in with the help of Davey as well. And I think ultimately season ticket sales will be impacted over the next few weeks about what happens with Alex Neil, what happens with transfers coming in, and if we can build on that momentum with additions to the squad and all that sort of stuff, then we'll see those numbers continue to rise. And it's brilliant. No, you can't question the loyalty of Sunderland supporters, can you? Like we've been through the last 4 years, and to have the semi-final crowd, to have the final crowd, it's just fantastic. But I think the only thing I would say as a criticism is I think the club have let the momentum of Wembley die down.
Yep.
In terms of promoting and marketing.
Yeah, they could be doing
selling. More. They could be doing loads more. It's almost like they've gone, right, Wembley, brilliant, we've won. Let those sales tick over. Let the website go. We'll have a few weeks off.
Couldn't agree with that more.
Like, to me, yes, people deserve holidays, all that sort of stuff, but they've really lost that momentum. You saw the promotion and the visuals that we saw for the semi-final.
Yeah.
Everything in terms of how that was marketed was superb, and I thought, right, we've actually got our act back together off the field, because there's been a load of things going on off the field that haven't been great, but we've let that momentum just wane out, fizzle out, and it's something I think the club should and could be doing more for.
Yeah, I agree. You wanted to make another point on there, Rich?
Yeah, just one more thing on that. I was reading through the minutes of Red and White Army meeting that kind of got lost in the pre-Wembley hype, and quite rightly, nobody wanted to be thinking about that. But the club made a point in that, which I have to disagree with, which is, you can't change everything all at once, etc. The club has got to start being able to do more than one thing at a time.
Absolutely.
Like, it seems like there's just a base level of capacity there in terms of staffing, where if there's something going on, a concert at the Stadium of Light, they can't promote season tickets. It's like that kind of underlying lack of capacity to do more than one thing.
Yeah.
It's something that's got to be sorted. If you look at the, Premier League clubs, top level Championship clubs, they're able to do that because they've got the capacity across their organisation to actually kind of handle, launching a kit at the same time as selling season tickets, at the same time as buying players, at the same time as dealing with an ownership battle going on in the background. You can't get distracted from the fact that they've got to build this business and build this club back up to where it should be.
Absolutely.
And the presumption is that it's capacity, isn't it? But we don't know. And it could just be attitude. It could be the general standard that's set within the club. You just don't know what's going on.
Who's in charge of marketing, overall at a board level? I don't think we have a marketing director.
I think Davison's in charge of all the off-field stuff, isn't he? But whether that falls under his remit or what, you don't know. And look, we're kind of guessing in those respects, aren't we? But if we are serious about maximising this and really revving it up, there's got to be more done off the field to get people engaged with the club.
I mean, I think as you mentioned there, Martin, the till the end branding that was being used in the run-up to the playoffs was absolutely fantastic. It really struck a chord, and they got that really, really well. And I like they're using the phrase "just the start" now to promote season tickets. It's great. It's all good stuff. But I think, as Rich said, they've got to put their shoulders to the wheel here. It's not just going to happen automatically. I think they've really got to make an effort to reach out to supporters who maybe are just hedging, maybe on the fence a little bit. Here, something special is happening here. We want you to be part of it. Come back type of thing. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. Just before we go, obviously, as everyone knows, Martin is in Australia, and he had a rather epic journey to the Northern Hemisphere for the playoff final, which I promised him we would touch on in this podcast. And he's looking at me. I
thought I got away with it.
He's looking at me with eyes like daggers at the moment. So would you like to pick that up, Martin, before we go and explain to the listeners exactly what happened and how it actually unfolded for you?
No, I need therapy. Well, flew from Australia to Heathrow for a few days on the bays and to go to the game. And I flew on the first leg of the flight. The fella sat next to me got off because he was ill at Darwin, which should have set alarm bells ringing. But yeah, landed at Heathrow, didn't feel too great. And yeah, had COVID. So I spent the week, I was only supposed to be there for 4 days. I ended up having about 8 days in England. And I flew 27 hours, 16,000 kilometres to watch the game on television, which it was in the right time zone, which is a tick in that box. I was able to stay with my mum and dad, which was very nice to spend a week with them by myself without the kids in tow and all that sort of stuff, and got looked after and got some home cooking. So, I'm clinging to the positives. But I have to say, I know you lads have watched the match back and back and back and back. I cannot bring myself to watch anything because I am still really upset by the whole thing. And it was my first trip for 3 years back home, and it'll probably be another couple of years before I can get back over to watch a game. I'd saved up money to come to a game on whatever game that might be, and obviously the playoff final was the perfect one. And yeah, I guess it's a risk you take. It's the way of the world at the moment. But yeah, I got tickets. Chris, Wynne, and I got tickets together with my parents, and Rich, I know you got tickets very close by, so I was looking forward to having a beer and having the crack with everybody. But yeah, that was it. So yes, I flew all that way to sit at home and watch the game on television.
Well, I promised we would end on an upbeat note, and I think we've done the exact opposite with Martin's tale of woe coming from Australia.
Well, what I'd say is it just shows it's a good example of the commitment of all Sunderland fans around the world. That if we can, if we've got the capacity, if we've got the money, been saving up, that we will go above and beyond to follow our club, and I think that's a massive. Definitely. There's not many clubs that would have people flying in from all different corners of the globe for a playoff.
That's right. Look, I'm certainly not the only one who flew in from here, there, and everywhere. I know lots of people flew in from Southern Hemisphere, from America, from all sorts of places, and all credit to everybody. And the only thing I would say is I was sat there before the match thinking, what, I would obviously much rather be in this situation and we win than be at Wembley and we lose. So as long as we bloody win, I'm going to have to rationalise that with myself and come to terms with it, and we did. And ultimately, I flew over to see us get promoted, and that's what we did. So look, you can't complain that much.
Absolutely. Right, well, I think that's a good place to end it. Thanks, Martin, and thanks, Rich, for joining us this morning. It's been a really enjoyable podcast. As always, keep your eyes on ROKERReport.com. We'll have loads of new material. Even though the season's finished, we'll keep on churning out material. So do check out the website, and thanks for listening. Catch you all later.